Hello again, everybody, and welcome to my SEC preview for 2012. Yes, I know I've already done the preview for the Auburn Tigers, and the link for that will be in the description box down below. And what I intend to do here is I intend to go by the SEC team by team. I will start in the SEC East, and with that, why don't we get started? Okay, we start off with the Georgia Bulldogs. They have 15 returning starters this year, 6 on offense, 9 on defense. They got killed in the SEC championship game by LSU last year, 42-10. And then they went on to lose in the Outback Bowl to Michigan State in triple overtime, 33-30. So with that said, a couple of my players to watch on offense. Quarterback Aaron Murray. Last year he threw for a school record 35 touchdowns, and he may be one of the best quarterbacks to come through Georgia in a while. Probably since at least David Green. And also, another guy to watch for is running back Keith Marshall. He is a true freshman and all, but he should push for playing time behind Isaiah Crowell. After in high school he rushed for over 4,500 yards and 55 touchdowns. And so he will be a good change of pace back to Crowell, I believe. And defense, guy to watch is Jarvis Jones, the linebacker. Last year he led the SEC in sacks with 13.5, and if he declares after this year, he should be a first-round pick, one would think. Well, and then going over a couple of their tough games, they have a tough early road trip on September 8th. They go to Columbia and Missouri. And they also have to play at South Carolina. And that game will more than likely determine who comes out of the SEC East and go on to play in the SEC title game. Then they also play in Jacksonville against Florida in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party game. But with that, I think they have a great chance to win the SEC East. If they beat South Carolina, they should be able to win it. But winning the SEC championship, that might be a little far-fetched. But still, they should have a good year, though. Okay, next up, we'll talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. The old Bull coach, Steve Spurrier's got 13 returning starters coming back. 7 on offense, 6 on defense. Last year, they won the Capital One Bowl against Nebraska by a score of 30-13. Okay, a couple players to watch on offense. One of them is Connor Shaw, the quarterback. Took over last year after Steven Garcia was kicked off the team. And he just needs to continue his development as a quarterback, I believe. Then also, running back Marcus Lattimore. Before he got injured, he was probably the top running back in the SEC. He's coming back from an ACL injury he suffered last year. One question is, will he be 100% to start the season? I mean, if he's anywhere close to that, that's going to really open up their running game. And he is one of the best backs in the SEC, if not the entire nation, when he's healthy. And on defense, you got defensive ends Devin Taylor and Jadeveon Clowney, who are replacing Melvin Ingram and Travion Robertson, excuse me. And with those two coming in to replace Ingram and Robertson, shouldn't be that much of a big drop-off there, if anything, because Clowney was the number 1 prospect coming out of high school. And, okay, a couple of matchups that they have this year, a couple of their big matchups. They do get Georgia at home on October 6th, and that game, as I was talking about with Georgia, that may determine who wins the SEC East this year. And that is the start of a 3-game stretch with them. They have to play at LSU, and they also play at Florida. So that's going to be, if they can get through that, okay, they should be able to make the SEC title game next year, for the second time in 3 years. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Florida Gators. Will Muschamp has 18 returning starters. He's got 6 on offense, 10 on defense. Also the kicker and the punter return. Last year they won the Gator Bowl against Ohio State 24-17, which is kind of below par for a Florida Gator team who's used to contending for national championships, especially when they had Tim Tebow. Anyway, a couple players to watch is actually a quarterback battle to watch is between Jacoby Brissett and Jeff Driscoll. One of these two guys needs to step up and be the leader of this team because that scoring offense was horrible last year, and their offense last year they were 105th in total offense, which is really below par for a Florida Gator team. But in their limited action last year, neither one was able to complete 50% of their passes. So that really has to improve if they're going to improve on those numbers on offense. And on defense, you have defensive end linebacker Ronald Powell. He suffered a torn ACL in the spring game this year. Is there any way he's going to be back at all this season? I mean, even if he's not even 100%, he may be able to help. And then also defensive back Matt Elam. He led the team in a lot of things last year on defense. Tackles for loss with 11. He also led in interceptions, pass breakups, and forced fumbles. They may be better than last year, but I think with that being said, they're only going to be third place in the SEC, which will still get them into a halfway decent bowl game. Their toughest road matchup should be the rivalry game against Florida State on November 24th, around Thanksgiving. And they do have LSU at home on October 6th. So that's why I think of their chances there. Okay, next is one of the new members of the SEC this year, coming over from the Big 12 Conference, the Missouri Tigers. Coach Gary Pinkel has 12 returning starters this year. He's got 5 on offense, 5 on defense, and also the kicker and punter return. Last year, they won the Independence Bowl against North Carolina by a count of 41-24. Player to watch this year is the true freshman wide receiver Dorial Green Beckham. He was the top wide receiver coming out of high school last year. He set national high school records for receiving yards and touchdown receptions for Hillcrest High School out of Springfield, Missouri. So he's a hometown not a hometown prospect, but a home state prospect. And you would think he will jump right into that lineup right away and give James Franklin a big target to work with. And now I'll talk about a couple of their tough games on their schedule. They're going to get indoctrinated into the SEC real quick because week 2 they got a home game against Georgia, and then also they have to play Alabama at home on October 13th. That'll be another tough home game for them. Probably their toughest road game will be September 22nd against South Carolina, and they should be able to go to a decent bowl again this year, I think. Okay, next team I will talk about is the Tennessee Volunteers and Coach Derek Dooley. They have 20 returning starters this year, which is pretty much everybody from a 5-7 team that did not go to a bowl last year. Okay, players to watch. One of them is quarterback Tyler Bray. He only has 12 career starts, but in 6 of those he's got over 300 yards passing in them. And he has 35 career touchdown passes. However, he does like a quality one against an elite SEC opponent, so I mean, to further legitimize himself, he's going to need to beat one of the top-tier SEC teams. And I was going to mention something about Derek Rogers. He's the All-SEC wideout. He had 67 receptions last year for 1,040 yards and 9 touchdowns. However, he's been indefinitely suspended by the program, so it's uncertain whether he's going to come back at any time at all this year. So somebody's going to have to step up into his role. One candidate would be Justin Hunter, who was hurt most of last year with an ACL injury. I mean, and he's a big target for Bray, so if he's 100% healthy, he could probably step in that role. Otherwise, you have the number 1 JUCO player in the nation last year with Cordarrelle Patterson. I believe that's right. And last year he had, for Hutchinson Community College, he had 61 receptions for over 900 yards and 15 touchdowns last year. And he was also explosive in the return game, where he had 3 returns for scores. Okay, I'll talk about somebody on defense, not necessarily a player, but they have a new defensive coordinator this year, Sal Sunseri, who comes from Alabama, and no, not with a banjo on his knee, but he's coming from Alabama, where he led their defense to 2 BCS championships in the past 3 years. He's indoctrinating his 3-4 scheme, and at first it's probably going to be a little tough for him to get players to fit that scheme. But if he can do that, it's going to be a challenge for him. But it's going to be a challenge I'm sure he's really ready for. But anyway, even with everybody coming back this year, it's going to be hard to see them going to a bowl game, unless they can pull off a couple of upsets along the way. But that's just kind of how I see that. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Vanderbilt Commodores and Coach James Franklin. Last year, they went to the Liberty Bowl and lost to Cincinnati 31-24, which was the first time they went bowling since 1982. Which means that Jay Cutler didn't even lead this team to a bowl game when he was there. But they have 18 returning starters, 9 on offense, 7 on defense, along with the kicker and punter. Player to watch on offense would be running back Zach Stacy, who set the all-time single-season rushing record for Vanderbilt history. And also on defense, you have the middle linebacker Chase Garnham, who takes over in the middle for the departed Chris Marvey. And he was the SEC's leading tackle over the past 4 years, so kind of big shoes to fill there. And they have a really tough opener at home this year against South Carolina. And then they also have to go to Georgia and go to Missouri. And that will test this team really early, I believe. And it may go a long way into determining whether they go bowling in consecutive seasons for the first time ever. So, be interesting to see. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats and Coach Joker Phillips. Well, they got 12 returning starters this year, 6 on offense, 5 on defense, and the kicker. Well, they didn't go to a bowl last year, probably because offensively they probably couldn't get out of their own way. They couldn't be much worse considering they were pretty much last in every statistical category in the SEC last year. Well, that and they also have an inexperienced offensive line, and they don't have very much depth behind them. So November probably can't come soon enough for basketball season. But anyway, and defensively they lose the top 2 tacklers in the SEC, and they also lose their two top starting cornerbacks and 2 linebackers. Well, if they were to make a bowl game this year, it'll probably be a minor miracle, because there's just so much youth on this team, and they're playing 8 teams that went to bowl games last year. So, wow. All right, I'm going to start looking at the SEC West now with LSU and Coach Les Miles. There are 12 returning starters. There's 6 on offense, 4 on defense, and the kicker and punter return. But that's not really the big story here. The big story was the Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu getting booted off the team for drug violations and this, that, and the other thing. And otherwise, the rest of it's been well documented, so I won't get into too much more about that. But last year they did beat Alabama in the regular season 9-6 in a very big defensive struggle. But they lost when it mattered in the BCS title game against Alabama, 21-0. Let's go over a couple of players to watch. Quarterback Zach Mettenberger. Number 1, he's not Jordan Jefferson. And number 2, he's got plenty of weapons at his disposal, such as running back Spencer Ware, and at wide receiver he's got Odell Beckham. So they're not going to be hurting for weapons on offense. And on defense, cornerback Thurald Simon, who is going to have to step in for Tyrann Mathieu as his replacement. He does have good size, though. I mean, he's 6'3", 190 pounds, and I mean it's hard to find cornerbacks that are that tall and that can play. But obviously, their toughest game this year is going to be November 3rd against Alabama, but that is at home. And the winner of this game should represent the SEC West in the SEC Championship. And in the last 6 years, the winner of the SEC has gone on to the BCS Championship and won it. So it's hard to imagine somebody out of the SEC not making the BCS title game again this year and going for 7 in a row. All right, I will now talk about the current BCS national champion, the Alabama Crimson Tide, along with Coach Nick Saban. They have 12 returning starters this year. There's 6 on offense, 4 on defense, and also the kicker and punter return. And like I said about LSU before, they did lose that game 9-6 in the regular season, but they won when it counted. They defeated said LSU team 21-0 in the BCS national championship game. Okay, so player to watch on offense will be quarterback A.J. McCarron. This year he'll probably be asked to do a little bit more than what he had to do last year because he doesn't have Trent Richardson in the backfield lining up behind him. But with that said, he's got Eddie Lacy lining up behind him this year and as Trent's replacement, and there's also true freshman T.J. Yeldon who will be lining up in the backfield too. I'm sure he'll get plenty of playing time as a true freshman. So, and then defensively, you got linebacker Adrian Hubbard, who's only a sophomore, but he's more than likely going to be the heir apparent to Courtney Upshaw, who ended up being a second-round pick of the Baltimore Ravens. So, and Alabama starts off on September 1st in Arlington, Texas, against the Michigan Wolverines. So that's going to be a really tough opening game for them. And whoever does win that game, that's probably going to give them a leg up in the race for the BCS title game. And November 3rd against LSU, that game will more than likely determine who comes out of the SEC West and plays in the SEC Championship. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks, who have 17 returning starters. They got 8 returning on offense, 7 on defense, along with kicker and punter. There's a new interim coach this year named John O. Smith, who used to be the coach at Michigan State, and who's replacing the fired Bobby Petrino after the escapades that he pulled, and those have been well documented, so I won't really go into those here. But last year they did win the Cotton Bowl against Kansas State by a count of 29-16. Give me a couple players to watch on offense. Quarterback Tyler Wilson, who last year threw for over 3,500 yards with 24 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. So one would think he would be able to improve on those numbers even. And then running back Niall Davis, who missed most of last year with an ankle injury, but in 2010, he rushed for over 1,300 yards and rushed for 13 touchdowns. So if he comes back healthy, that should be a big boost to the running game. And also on defense, a guy to look out for is outside linebacker Alonzo Highsmith. That name sounds familiar. It probably should, because his father played for Miami of Florida back in the mid-1980s under Jimmy Johnson. And last year he led Arkansas in tackles for a loss after being a JUCO All-American at Phoenix College. So, but if the defense improves like it did last year, they could potentially have an outside shot at winning the SEC West. But more realistically, they're probably going to be a third place team. They'll probably end up going to like the Cotton Bowl or something like that again. So, okay, next is the other new entry into the SEC this year, also from the Big 12, the Texas A&M Aggies, along with new coach Kevin Sumlin, who comes over from the University of Houston. He inherits 14 returning starters, 8 on offense, 5 on defense, and the punter. Last year, they won the Meineke Car Care Bowl against Northwestern by the count of 32-22. Player to watch on offense would be running back Kristen Michael. Yes, it looks like Christine. No, he's not a girl. But he's coming back off an injury this year, and he'll be expected to replace the departed Cyrus Gray, who did a good job for them last year. Then on defense, a couple guys to look out for are Demontre Moore and outside linebacker Sean Porter. Both men had a big hand in leading Texas A&M and leading the Big 12 in sacks last year as a team. So, but overall prediction, Big 12 is one thing, but the SEC is quite another. It's one thing to be competitive in the Big 12, but it's a whole other thing to be competitive in the SEC. It's hard to imagine they're going to be too competitive in the SEC West. That's not to say they're going to be a bad team or anything. I don't think they will be, but all that said, they can probably still win 7 or 8 games. So not bad. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who have 12 returning starters this year. They have 4 on offense, 7 on defense, plus the punter. Last year, they won in the Music City Bowl against Wake Forest by a count of 23-17. An offensive player to watch this year is quarterback Tyler Russell, who was a former Parade All-American. He's finally getting a shot at being the starter after splitting time over the last couple of years. And a defensive player to watch for the Bulldogs is defensive end Danico Autry, who was a JUCO All-American last year at East Mississippi Community College, and he will be expected to help a defense that only had 21 sacks last year. That's pretty pathetic. So any kind of output he can give them, I'm sure will be appreciated. And as far as overall outlook on the team, they may be able to match their win total of 7 last year, especially with a favorable early season schedule. But later on this season, they got pretty much a murderer's row in the SEC. They have to play at Alabama. That's more than likely going to be a loss. Then home against Texas A&M, that's not going to be easy. Playing at LSU, that might be another loss. And then they end that stretch with a home game against Arkansas. And depending on how they do in that stretch of games, that's probably going to determine how their season's going to end up going. Okay, then finally I'm going to talk about the Ole Miss Rebels, who have a new coach named Hugh Freeze, who comes over from Arizona State. And they have 16 returning starters this year, 7 on offense, 7 on defense, and including the kicker and punter. Last time they made a bowl game was back in 2009 when they went to the Cotton Bowl. QB battle to watch is going to be between Bray Brunetti and Bo Wallace, who's a junior mid-year enrollee. You would think that Brunetti would have the edge in that competition because knowing the system perhaps, but Bo Wallace did play under Hugh Freeze at Arizona State. He transferred from there, so either way they're gonna have to settle on a quarterback and pretty soon. And on defense, you have Channing Ward, a defensive end who last year was the top in-state prospect in Mississippi, and he should be an instant starter. But maybe because of the lack of talent in the position, it's hard to say. But you think if nothing else, he'll at least get some playing time if he's not outright starting. Say something about Hugh Freeze. He's been known for quick turnarounds wherever he's gone. However, it's been in high school and in the Sun Belt Conference, but SEC is a whole nother level right there. I mean, it's not considered the best football conference in the nation for nothing, but if they can at least double their win total from last year, that it'd probably be a pretty good start for them. I don't see them going to a bowl game this year, so. Okay, as far as who I think is going to be in the SEC title game this year, I think it's going to be South Carolina going up against whoever wins the game between LSU and Alabama, whoever that is. I really can't say who's going to win that game right now, and kind of just, I mean, you kind of have to figure in for injuries and whatnot, but anyway, but who I think is going to win the SEC title game is going to be, I think it'll be the winner of LSU and Alabama, and they will more than likely be representing the BCS or the SEC in the BCS title game this year. So anyway, I am Marvelous Mark from the Off the Rope Show, stepping away from wrestling for a while and doing my college football reviews. Coming up in the next few days, I will have my Big 12 preview and my Big 10 previews. So comment down below and tell me who you think is going to win the SEC this year, and I will talk to you later.